Oh, folks, this is JC again. This is Monday, March the 3rd, 2014, and this will be chapter 10 of my book that I call Todd. So, without further ado, I'll go ahead and start it. Chapter 10, Todd. When Les had regained her composure, Todd led her into the kitchen. Aunt Lola and his mom were arranging the dishes of food on the kitchen table. Todd said, "Mom, Aunt Lola, I want you to meet someone." They both turned and looked at Todd and Leslie. Todd said, "This is Leslie Foley, a special friend of mine." He smiled a big smile, and Les reddened just a bit. Aunt Lola was the first to respond. She extended her hand and said, "Oh my God, you have a girlfriend. How wonderful." And she pulled Leslie to her and hugged her. Todd's mother watched her sister's antics without speaking. Then, after Aunt Lola released Leslie, Betsy took Leslie's hand and said, "Hello, my dear. I'm very happy to meet you. Have you known Todd for long?" Les hesitated only an instant, then said, "Only forever. I just wasn't aware of it until yesterday." Betsy smiled at that, and her mind flashed back many years to a small school desk built for two, when another girl had said something similar to her special boy. Now Todd's mother gently pulled Les to her and very tenderly embraced her. "I knew a girl just like you once, many years ago. I'm so glad you're here." A few more people were still expected to arrive, so Todd went back into the living room so he could greet them. He felt a start when he remembered Leslie's parents were here, and he had not yet introduced them to his mother and his aunt. He smiled at them and turned back toward the kitchen. Just as Leslie came out with his mother and Aunt Lola May, she waved Todd on and stopped at her parents, who had stood up when they saw their daughter coming. "Mom, Dad, I would like you to meet Mrs. Daniels, Todd's mother, and her sister, Aunt Lola. Mrs. Daniels and Aunt Lola, these are my parents, George and Carla Foley." They extended their hands and expressed their deepest sympathy. Betsy nodded graciously. Then Aunt Lola May stepped forward and shook hands with each of them. She shook Mr. Foley's hand first, then took Mrs. Foley's hand and loudly said, "Carla, it's so wonderful to meet you. I just love your little girl, and so does Todd." "Oh, Todd," said Les, "there's food in the car. Will you help me bring it in?" She turned to Aunt Lola and asked, "Aunt Lola, do you like teriyaki beef strips and Mexican enchiladas?" "Oh my, yes, I do. Mexican enchilada with strawberry margarita to wash them down," said Aunt Lola with a wink and a smile. Les and Todd went to Leslie's car and got the dishes of food and took them into the kitchen. Les placed them in strategic spots where they'd be sure to be noticed. She smiled at Todd. "Mom's a great cook," she said. Todd looked at Les intently for a second. "Oh," she said, "Dad is a child psychologist with a thriving practice, and Mom manages the cafeteria at the junior college." She grinned and winked. "Gotcha." "Well," said Todd with a huge grin, "it looks like we are two of a kind." "That's exactly what I was wondering. How did you know?" "Just logic," grinned Les. "It hadn't as yet come up. I figured you were ready to ask, so I just answered." About 2 o'clock that afternoon, the guests began to leave. Soon all were gone except Aunt Lola and the Foleys. Todd had asked Les to have her parents stay after the Foleys left. He had something on his mind he needed to address as soon as possible. Now only the Foleys, Aunt Lola, Betsy, and Todd were here, and Todd asked them to sit. He had something he wanted to say. Todd told him it was very important they were told the facts, the decisions he and Leslie had already made, and why. Todd began, "I have to tell you, Leslie is a miracle I never thought would, or even could, happen to me. We've known each other only one day, but we've vowed to each other that we would share our lives together forever." Leslie's parents appeared, if not shocked, at least puzzled. Mrs. Foley spoke to her daughter. "Leslie, are you sure about this? Isn't it a bit sudden? You've known this man such a short time, and you both are still very young. Your father and I only heard about him yesterday. When have you even been together?" Leslie had intended for Todd to do the explaining, but she decided to speak up. "Mom, you and Dad both know I would never do anything to shame or in any other way offend either of you. You two are the ones I love and respect more than anyone else in the world. You know I've always been sensible and careful about everything, especially personal things, things of the heart. I've only had one boyfriend, then at age 16, and I was asked by him to compromise myself. I refused, and he dumped me. Remember, Mom? Yes, she did remember, and she had been very proud of her daughter. I know you think this sounds crazy, and I don't blame you for wondering, but after spending half an hour with this boy, Les said, I knew there could never be anyone else, no other man in my life, except Todd. It's crazy. Todd said it. It was as if a miracle were happening. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Neither Betsy nor Aunt Lola had spoken as yet. Now Betsy looked at her son and asked, Son, are you sure about this? Absolutely sure, with no doubts or reservations at all. She knew without a doubt that her son's answer would be the right one. She knew him that well. Yes, Mom, he said, I'm sure. Aunt Lola smiled. She knew what her sister knew about Todd. She knew this would be no mistake. Mr. Foley had been silent, but now he spoke. I love my daughter more than anyone else in the world, she and her mother, and I have every confidence in her decisions about anything. Still, I have to wonder about this sudden attraction between you two. As much as I'm sure your being together has been nothing except moral and honorable, I have to say I have questions I think need to be answered. Young man, we know absolutely nothing about you, about your education, your experiences, about what you may or may not have done, or whatever plans you have for your life, for your future. There's no offense intended here, but I have to say, this meeting and these circumstances of your father's death make me wonder about you, about your character, and if there might be some genetic or other emotional thing that might come to light later, when it may be too late to change anything between you and my daughter. Leslie's a grown woman physically, and may do as she wishes, but as her father, I'd like to know more about you before I, along with my daughter, commit to you. Without hesitation, Todd said, Mr. Foley, that's just what I wanted you to say. I agree completely. I'm sure I would feel the same way if I were in your place. Frankly, you know about as much about me as my mother and aunt know about Leslie. I'd like to tell you everything about both Les and me. Then Todd turned to Leslie and asked, Les, do you love me enough to wait 2.5 years to marry me? Les took his hand and said, I'd wait forever. She knew what he referred to. Betsy and Aunt Lola both knew what Todd was referring to, of course, his age. In this state, he could marry at age 15 with the legal guardian's permission. He could marry at a younger age without her permission if he were to move out of his mother's house, become self-sufficient, and be declared emancipated. Todd, of course, could very easily do this if he cared to, but that's something he would never consider. Now Todd addressed his mother and Aunt Lola. Mom, Aunt Lola, what do you think about telling Leslie's parents my story? Aunt Lola said, It's up to you and Betsy. Betsy took several moments to consider this. Then she said, If you really love this girl, and I'm sure you do, I think it would be the thing to do. The folks would better understand you and their daughter. It doesn't need to be today. Today's not the last day of the world. Then she added, although to me right now, it seems like it is. Mrs. Foley spoke up. Is there some sort of mystery here that we should know about? A worry frown creased her forehead. Leslie took her mother's hand. Mom, it's nothing bad, nothing to even worry about. It's just a personal thing with the Daniels. Mrs. Foley looked at her husband. He said to everyone, I'd like to know what this is about, and the sooner, the better. Now, this is the end of chapter 10 of my book entitled Todd. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll tune in for the next chapter. Thank you very much. This is JC.